What is up, all you GBA type fans? This is Tom. I'm here bringing you guys my Week 9 team builder for Geo and the San Francisco GiEnteis. This will be our rematch from, I believe, our Week 3 battle. So this week, Geo's team is a lot more threatening than it was back when we faced him in Week 3. His team is going to consist of Tapu Fini, Salamence, Arcanine, Conkeldurr, Amoonguss, Gengar, Bronzong, Heliolisk, Umbreon, Rhyperior, and finally, his bread and butter, Ditto. You'll see his team there on the right side. Going down his team, I still feel like a lot of his team, as compared to last time where it was kind of passive, a little weak, well, obviously very weak to Thundurus T and in combination with Zygarde Doggo. This team doesn't really have a problem with either. He outside of Zygarde, which he does have to run like specific defensive mons for, he does have checks for Thundurus in terms of like Ditto and Amoonguss, even Rhyperior. But also his roster now allows Umbreon to shine in a more prominent defensive role, while also allowing things like Conkeldurr, Arcanine, Tapu Fini to also now be offensive rather than just being primarily defensive, with obviously, Z Salamence being always a problem. Conkeldurr is a problem for my team like it was last time. But going straight down, I feel like Tapu Fini, Salamence, Conkeldurr, and even Ditto to an extent are kind of his biggest offensive problems. Tapu Fini because it's in a nice speed tier, outpaces Hitmonlee. The Water Fairy Stab hits everything. Even Vaporeon's not really going to enjoy those hits. Porygon 2 can take those hits, but still going to be kind of pressed, especially like Nature's Madness. He can taunt, stop my recover, and so on and so forth. And of course, as being his only reliable defogger, it's going to be pretty much a given that he's going to have that as his hazard removal option. Next up, Salamence, Zmon. Gonna have to prep for this like I did last time in terms of Porygon 2 on a defensive role. Salamence is always a problem. Just the fact that, Devastating Draco or Supersonic Sky Strike off of a base 190 fly it's going to be something to prepare for, and certainly something I have to look out for in terms of if he does bring Salamence. Conkeldurr, it has so much coverage options, regardless of the fact that it's so slow, it's bulky, and it could hit all of my team super effectively based on whatever coverage he wants to run. And then finally, Ditto. I see this as a problem because the way that this team looks now with Ditto, Geo's team needs setup, but Ditto kind of makes it a consequence to bring setup versus Geo. So you kind of see the good antithesis that Geo has created for his team while he's brought Ditto. Because a lot of his walls, things like Amoonguss, things like Umbreon, even things like Arcanine, while they're going to be bulky, you kind of need setup in some nature to break those type of mons, and with Ditto, it's going to force his opponent to either play in a way that is going to be just checking his problems without, active setup, or it's going to be in a way that if he does bring Ditto, like I said, it's going to punish the opponent's setup based on, like Scarf, Ditto, and stuff like that. Next up, the number 2 line, Arcanine, Amoonguss, Bronzong, Umbreon, Rhyperior, probably all in that, big wall bunch. Arcanine is going to be a defensive role this time. It has to come because I have Darmanitan, Hitmonlee. Last time he used Gyarados for that. He used Gyarados to counter things like Hitmonlee and Incineroar, and Darmanitan's much more threatening. Arcanine does a better job handling it with direct recovery. Amoonguss is just good in its AV bullshit and sporing everything, and probably even a defensive role. It's going to be very good across my team because, as we've seen in the past, Leech Seed across my entire team. He could spore almost my entire team. Shiftry's not going to enjoy coming in on an Amoonguss, and it pretty much just has a very good matchup this week. Bronzong or Rhyperior are going to be brought this week, considering the fact that he's going to need to get rocks up with one or the other. I feel like Bronzong's more prominent because it does have that levitate ability, so I feel like it's just going to be better for him to bring, and it's better on the Spadef side, so at least he could take more hits as compared to Rhyperior. You have to push all of it in a special defense, and if Thundurus T is running Grass Knot, or even HP Ice to an extent, it's just going to get blown right the fuck back. But Bronzong allows him to also take on Gardevoir in a way, so Next up we have Umbreon, which is going to be kind of a problem. Like I said before, it allows him to Wish Pass. It allows him to... It has a more prominent role this time around because of how his team is now crafted to be there's a side for offense, now there's a side for defense, and Ditto's kind of right there in the middle. But Umbreon now has a more prominent role because of what he got rid of in terms of his passive walls, and now Umbreon just looks that much better on this roster. Finally, I'm going to put a Heliolisk and Gengar down at the bottom. I think there's just better options against my team. We saw that Heliolisk was, while it's an electric type with Pivot, I do have Nidoqueen, and I do have things like Porygon 2 that can kind of sponge those hits. Even Gardevoir can somewhat take those hits. And then Gengar, Porygon 2, and even Nidoqueen of Vaporeon could take some hits. So overall, much more frightening team. I feel like I have to prepare way differently this time than I did for last time. I'm only going to have maybe 2 of the similar sets, but we're not going to see, Specs Thundurus with Choice Banded Zygarde just wreck through his entire team. It's much better this time. So with that being said, we're going to look at my team. Celesteela. This is going to be primarily a special defensive set with, obviously you see its item. What it's going to be for is going to be for Amoonguss. This is going to be my immediate switch into Amoonguss. It's also going to be what I'm going to use to scout or at least get information on if Tapu Fini is primarily defensive. Careful nature, max HP, 124 Spadef allows me to take a various type of hits. Not going to enjoy taking hits from Heliolisk, but I can take Life Orb Shadow Balls from Gengar. I can take Hydro Pumps, obviously, from the Tapu Fini. I can also take, I think HP Fire does like 11% to Amoonguss. Granted, I can't Leech Seed it, but this is the first time I am running Leech Seed plus Protect on Celesteela after, what, 8 weeks of this season? So fuck that. This thing could also passively take on Rhyperior, and Bronzong's not going to do a lot of damage. Also, this set self-checks Ditto in case he wants to use that to take on, a lot of my team. So, with that in mind, I'm kind of going to use this as just a means of probably sapping away HP from certain mons of his, things like Bronzong, things like Umbreon, but obviously I can't do anything against Amoonguss. I could even throw a Bleach Sheet against a Conkeldurr and Arcanine on a switch-in. Just overall, I think Celesteela is a very good option this week, namely in a defensive role. Next up, we're going to have Thundurus. This is going to be a Scarf Thundurus, because Nasty Plot just... I was going back and forth. Like, Nasty Plot could work this week, but if I run Nasty Plot 3 attacks and he brings Ditto, then if I ever get the chance to get to +2 and I don't take out Ditto first, which, knowing me, it's a possibility. It's certainly a possibility. He can just come in and HP Ice pretty much wrecks my entire team at a +2, Thundurus, Timid. Max 4 HP, very standard, T-Bolt, HP Ice, Psychic, and U-Turn. U-Turn over Volt Switch because that means that Rhyperior is not a free switch. U-Turn also still gives me that pivot option. Granted, it's not my best pivot option, but it's an option, and I will use that over Volt Switch because then I would have to hard switch, and if he ever gets Rocks up, then at least I don't get any damage on anything because U-Turn can hit, things like Umbreon, but overall, I just want some sort of pivot. Thunderbolt there is there for power. HP Ice is there because nothing really wants to take an HP Ice on his team. Rhyperior is going to take upwards like 20-30%. Same thing with a defensive Amoonguss. Just things that are going to probably want to switch into an HP Ice or Arcanine to Spadef-ish, Tapu Fini, even Umbreon to an extent. But it also hits Ditto HP Ice. Hits Ditto if it's a 1v1 type of situation. Psychic punishes Conkeldurr and Amoonguss, except if they're AV, they're going to take those hits. Not nicely, but namely Amoonguss is going to chew that hit. And even Fini can't really switch into a lot of Psychics. T-Bolt, obviously, like I said, for power, and it's to clean up once Rhyperior and Amoonguss are gone. And then Scarf, obviously, checks a +1 speed Salamence after Dragon Dance. Next up, we're going to have a very interesting set that I actually kind of like this week with Nidoqueen. It's going to be a Life Orb set. A Dual Stab Smackdown Stealth Rock set. This set is not that bulky, 60 HP with 4 and 4 in defense and Spadef. It's going to be enough speed to outspeed and 2-hit KO a fully defensive Fini that obviously is not running pretty much like any real speed investment. If it's creeping for certain things, then yes, I'll be able to outpace this. But if it's running like significant speed, well, then it doesn't really matter. But the Fini I think he's going to bring is going to be one that's going to be designed to take 1,000 arrows after Stealth Rock and leftovers and all that happy horseshit. But Smackdown, Stealth Rock's obviously there because it's good against his team for things like Arcanine, even. Salamence obviously is just Rocks are good against his team. He has one means of getting rid of them, and going to take advantage of that. Dual stab hits the majority of his team. Like I said, this thing is going to outspeed a... Oh, also it outspeeds a non-plus speed Arcanine that has less than 124 speed investment. So he can run a generally speedy Arcanine, but this would outpace it just based on my investment. And again, goes out the window if it's a very speedy, Jolly Arcanine with, primarily offensive, whatever Geo wants to take care of. But the idea for this Nidoqueen is it's going to be able to knock out a primarily Spadef Bronzong after a Smackdown on a switch-in plus 20% or so damage. So approximately like a few Stealth Rock switch-ins, some chip damage from something like Thundurus or Celesteela after a Leech Seed or Porygon 2, or even like a Moonblast or a Psyshock from the Gardevoir. Overall, I kind of like this set. I think it's probably my best option, because last time we saw that he ran Aqua Berry versus my Nidoqueen, whereas this time I kind of like the fact that if he does bring it in, he has an Aqua Berry. He's not going to expect the Smackdown, and then obviously Earth Power is going to be able to clean him out. But it's interesting. It's much better than it's less passive than what I've brought in the past, and while it's bulky-ish, it's also another offensive capability to take down things like Tapu Fini, which I know if I just have Thundurus, it's not going to be the best option to take out Tapu Fini. Even though it is powerful, this is kind of like a secondary option that I could use during the game. Full credit for this set goes to Aster, because he did help me kind of build for this week, so props to him. I do like this set, and I hope that it actually does work as well as it looks like it is going to, at least on paper. Next up, we have Porygon 2. This is going to be a Bolt Beam, Psyshock for cover. We did have Toxic on there prior to putting Psyshock on, but I kind of made the decision to put Psyshock on because last time when I did face Geo, he did bring Conkeldurr in pretty much every time against Porygon 2. Now, it also takes care of Amoonguss to an extent, because they're probably both or either are going to be AV, and Psyshock obviously bypasses. It's not going to do a lot of damage, but if he is going to bring either of those in on Porygon 2, I can hit it much harder than I would if I went for T-Bolt or Ice Beam, which, if I recall, T-Bolt Ice Beam is going to do maybe like 16-20%. Psyshock's doing at least 38 to 40% to, any sort of AV bulky variant of either Amoonguss or Conkeldurr. The idea here for Porygon 2, primarily defensive with Trace. Last time we saw that I was able to trace the Intimidates from the Gyarados. I don't think he's going to run Intimidate this week, either on Mence or on Arcanine, but if he does, this is my best option for either, because it'll shut down them from setting up even a -1 close combat to a primarily defensive Violite. Porygon 2 is not going to do that much damage. This pretty much stops Mence until this thing is destroyed. Also, the nice thing about this is that even at +1, a Devastating Draco, that's already, a +1 attack, is going to do like 75 or 73 to like 80. So I'm able to recover it off. He then burns his Z Crystal, and then we take it from there. And I obviously have options in Gardevoir to take that Dragon move if he is forced to go for Outrage. But this Porygon 2, while it is, slower than pretty much a lot of things on his team, it is another very solid option in terms of walling capability for this week, just like Celesteela. Next up, we have CB Doggo. This is going to look relatively familiar because this is pretty much the exact set I ran last time. Except I changed up Earthquake for 1,000 Waves. Kind of wanted to find a reason to run that move. 1,000 Arrows, obviously he doesn't really have a lot of good switch-ins outside of a max defensive Tapu Fini and a very, very defensive Umbreon. Jolly obviously outpaces both the Gengar and the Heliolisk, so that's why I'm just going to ensure that that happens. If there's Scarf, it doesn't really matter. But his 1,000 Arrows switch-ins are very, very few. He has to primarily keep what he's going to bring in, being Fini or Umbreon, at very high health, and ensures that they don't get chipped away and then allow, obviously, Doggo to sweep later on. Even a defensive, Rhyperior, Arcanine, or Amoonguss is not really going to enjoy taking 1,000 Arrows. They can all relatively recover it off, but it's not going to be that enjoyable for a good chunk of his team. Then 1,000 Waves, we were going back and forth, like Brick Break, I could even go put on Earthquake, but that's what I have 1,000 Waves, or 1,000 Arrows for. But 1,000 Waves, the idea was that if he uses Amoonguss to kind of pivot in between to take damage, in terms of finding out what Doggo's item is, like early on in the match, 1,000 Waves essentially forces Amoonguss, it traps Amoonguss for as long as Zygarde Doggo is in. So if I went for 1,000 Waves, I got off a good chunk of damage, I would then force Amoonguss to play what's in front of me instead of Geo making a double switch or potentially, you know, just kind of scouting for my move or my items, stuff like that. So then it would allow me to get into Celesteela. Now, he could foul play, but if he spores like I kind of would expect, then Celesteela comes in and I can start heavy slamming things. So that's kind of the idea with this Zygarde set. It's the best possible option, and then 36 defense EVs gives me a better chance of living something like a Mach Punch from a Conkeldurr. Finally, we have my best switch in for Conkeldurr in general. I was playing around with a Life Orb Defog knockoff Giga Drain Extra Sensory Shift Tree set, but just based on speed tiers and a lot of the typings on Geo's team, I didn't think it was my best option, and then it would allow Conkeldurr to come in, either click Ice Punch or Drain Punch against a lot of my team, or even Mach Punch, and just blow back whatever it's facing or whatever it wants to switch in. This is going to be a max HP, max defense, timid Gardevoir. The timid is there because that allows me to be 5 base speed points ahead of a no speed invested or non-plus speed nature Tapu Fini. Obviously, I think he is going to try and speed creep Gardevoir, but this is my best option while still allowing me to have the best possible chance to live attacks from Conkeldurr. Psyshock punishes Conkeldurr Amoonguss for Gengar. Obviously, I said that before in regards to P2 running Psyshock. No Moonblast. It kind of might hurt, but you're going to understand where I'm coming from for the rest of the set. Moonblast would have been for things like Umbreon or even Conkeldurr, but Psyshock hits Conkeldurr a little bit harder, especially if it is AV. And I'm just going to chew non-invested Moonblasts forever, and it doesn't really matter if I lower its SPDF, or special attack rather, because it's just going to go for something like Foul Play or Payback. Yeah, so that doesn't matter. Also, you know, if I have Moonblast for something like Gengar or Mence, you know, Mence is still going to bot me, and it's not coming in on a Gardevoir. Especially when I have P2 alive that can take those setup against Mence, and even Celesteela to an extent can take it on if it's not Z move and it's more of a choice variant. You know, I could avoid the Earthquake. I could use Porygon 2 to scout for like a fire move. Obviously, Dragon move is not going to do that much to either. You kind of get my point. Moonblast wasn't necessary on this set just based on all of Geo's, you know, team options. Willow is there because, if you haven't noticed, Geo doesn't run Guts Conkeldurr like ever. And against my team, even against Callum, when you saw that match, Geo ran Iron Fist against a team that has a Sableye. And that didn't really, and even against me, again in week 3, he ran Iron Fist against my team, which, you know, it gave him power, but this time having Will-O-Wisp will allow me to cripple it if it tries to stay in, if it does have the Poison Jab this time, or if I try and catch something on a switch. The Will-O-Wisp is nice just for overall chip damage. If it comes down to Gardevoir versus Conkeldurr, having that Will-O-Wisp will allow me to take its hits much better, but also cripple it outright. It also cripples a Gyro Ball Bronzong as well as Rhyperior, which could have Mega Horn or Earthquake. Having all these defensive options and just allowing to cripple his primary physical attackers is going to be very good for me in terms of this matchup. Obviously, he could run the Heal Bell on his Umbreon, but overall, if Umbreon is to come, then I think this is my best option for a lot of the problems that the other team, the other part of the team, doesn't necessarily want to take on. Finally, we have Wish. This just allows for primary recovery on Gardevoir's end, as well as passing wishes on to other things across the team, namely things like Thundurus, things like Celesteela, because they don't have immediate recovery, and of course rocks are always a gigantic problem for my team, which doesn't have the best hazard removal. The idea is that if Bronzong is in and it's not an offensive set, as primarily SPDF set, which I kind of expect for something like Nidoqueen, what I can do is I could potentially Wisp to cripple its Gyro Ball, so it doesn't really do that much, especially because I am max HP, max defense. And then I can go for wishes. I can taunt. Oh, also taunt is there to shut down Stealth Rock from both Bronzong and Rhyperior. And if his Fini does have Calm Mind, I could taunt it, which I could also stop for defogging too if it really comes down to that. But that's kind of the idea for all this. Taunt, Willow, Wish, they all have their purposes and they fit a little bit better than Moonblast does. But pass wishes, could taunt, shut down the passive bullshit from Zong, Rhyperior, or Fini, and then Wish there to cripple things. But overall, that's the entire team. Hopefully you guys understand the preparation that went into this match. I kind of don't like rematches because some coaches Namely, week 3 to now, a lot of the rosters have changed. You're going to notice that for when we take on Crimson and even Necrostevo, who, even just the way that Cooper played versus Necrostevo is much different. So we'll get to that later on. But hopefully you guys enjoy the team. Leave your comments down below. I always read your comments and respond if I have the time to. But I will see you guys tomorrow for our match. I don't know when it's going to go up. I don't know if Gio's going to shoot it up early. I unfortunately I work the midnight shifts, so I don't know when we will get my matchup, but if you see Gio's first, you'll see that this match is very interesting. So, with that in mind, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Later.